It's a great pity that Fitzroy ever left here. I came here for many, many years. I don't know, probably I saw my first game here about, relying on my memory, somewhere about 1920, 1919 perhaps, maybe 1918 even, but about that period. And Fitzroy were a very strong team in those days. They were noted as being a very strong and supposed to be a very rough sort of team. They had some very, very fiery and rough matches, and particularly they used to have, strangely enough, the two teams they seemed to have the most trouble with, the most trouble in regard to rough play and unruly behaviour. I don't mean the spectators, I mean the footballers. Were Essendon in the 20s. Essendon and Fitzroy were very, very strong rivals. Fitzroy premiers in 1922, they beat Essendon in the final. And Essendon were premiers in 1923, and I think they beat Fitzroy in the final, but they had some terribly, very, very rough games. And Geelong, we used to have some rough games with Geelong. There was, if I may be permitted on this particular segment to indulge in a little music, I should say. There was a song at the time on Mr. Callaghan, Mr. Sheen, and it was, oh, Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Sheen, have you heard about the Fitzroy football team? I'll admit they're big and strong, but they have nothing on Geelong, and the hooting on last Saturday was obscene. Oh, Mr. Sheen, oh, Mr. Sheen, it was the most disgraceful thing I've ever seen. When Big Thomas of Geelong hit ball with little Jimmy Freak. What on purpose, Mr. Gallagher? No one ear hole, Mr. Sheen. Well, that was a popular adaptation of the song Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Sheen, which was very well known at that particular time. But you wouldn't think of Geelong as being a very rough team nowadays, but they had some very, very rough games. I should point out that poor little Jimmy Freak that was his correct name, and he was a very small man. He was only about 5'6" tall. He wouldn't get a game in the league side nowadays. He was Fitzroy's full forward, and that hulking Thomas of Geelong was not such a big man. He was about 5'10", I suppose, but he weighed about 14 stone, and he ironed Jimmy Freak out, which wasn't very difficult, providing you could catch him. But they had some very good teams, Fitzroy, and I was thinking there was 6 Brownlow medals won on this ground. There was Baron Ruthven, Chicken Smallhorn, and Dinny Ryan, and the great Hayden Bunton won 3 at this ground. Fitzroy also won another one. There was Bernie Quinlan, but at that time Fitzroy were playing down at the Junction at St Kilda, not playing here. Most of the games that I saw more games at the Fitzroy ground, and my very strong memories are of Reg Patterson and I going. We went week after week after week for years, and of course every second week you'd be playing at Fitzroy, and there were years there when Fitzroy had a very poor side, but we kept on going and hoping for something would come good in the future, particularly Reg. Reg was an extreme optimist. Reg always believed that things would get better. I always believed that they weren't too good and they were liable to get worse. But Reg always thought Reg was the hope of the side Reg would always say, "Oh, they're improving a bit. I think I see a bit of improvement. You know, so and so's a bit better. They're coming good. I think next week they'll, you know." But I would say, "Oh no, they haven't got much of a team, Reg. You know." But I suppose Reg is the best sort of person. Was the best sort of person to have following. I came here. Well, initially we used to come here in the Jinka and park about 150, 200 yards from the ground. I wasn't one to go and sit in the grandstands. I suppose one reason would be because I never got the ground in time to get a seat, but I prefer to stand up. Nobody stands up nowadays at the cricket, at the football, but I prefer to stand up. The position I liked was the half-forward flank because you had a reasonable view of both ends of the ground. A lot of people like to go behind the goals at one end or the other, but in that case you see a lot of the game when it's at that end, and when it's at the other end you don't see it at all, because of course nowadays we see most of our football on television and we get up very close to it. It's the camera goes right into the packs and you see everything, but in those days, because we had to come and see for ourselves. I saw some great games here and some great footballers, apart from the Brownlow medal winners, the fellas who stick in my mind. I always had a great time for Owen Abrahams, played in the half-forward flank. Oh, wonderful footballer, no publicity, and he was never a media man in the days when he retired, but he was one of the greatest footballers Fitzroy ever had. He never won a Brownlow medal, played plenty of interstate games, but I saw him from the half-forward flank kick 8 goals one day against Richmond, and in those days you used to have to stick to your position. If you played in the half-forward flank, you stayed in the half-forward flank. Nowadays you can be playing in the back pocket and you can wander down the ground and have a shot for goals. The type of game has changed completely. I'm not decrying the present day game. I think the present day game is more skillful. I'm not only thinking, I'm positive of it, that the present day AFL football in the main is much more skillful than the players of even 20 years ago, let alone 40 or 50 years ago. I can remember here too when I'd be seeing Stephen Fitzroy playing and hearing a fellow saying, "Oh, Jim Toohey's at the war, I believe. He's coming home. He's coming home, I believe. Oh, he's a good. He'll strengthen the side." And so the 14-18 war was still on at that particular time. So it must have been about 1918. Maybe the war was just over in 1919. The fellow hadn't been discharged. But it's a place of great memories, and to me it's a terrific shame that it ever was allowed to go right out of business. I mean, going to the football, in one aspect, is very much like going to church or going to the film, or you generally go to the same part of the theatre. If you go to the pictures, or go to Mass on a Sunday, you go to the same part of the church generally. You generally sit somewhere about the same seat. It's a matter of habit. And the same thing applies at football. I used to always get in one particular spot, and you got to know the people around you, and you'd go finish this season and come back next season, and Reg would say to me, "Oh, there's that lady over there. She's got a bit older looking, hasn't she?" Because we hadn't seen her for 6 months. We hadn't seen her for the cricket season. We didn't know her and didn't know anything at all about her. But there used to be a fella stand near me, and he was a polite man and all that, and very well dressed man, a man about 55, and he was very, he wasn't slow at giving his opinion about the game, and I didn't think much of his opinions actually. I thought that he was very often very wrong. I didn't think he knew much about it at all, but I didn't know who he was, anything at all about him. Then our Fitzroy were going very badly, and they had a reform committee, and they had their photos in a paper, and lo and behold, one of the fellows was this fellow who stood in front of me. His name was Ern Josephs, and he was manager of the Golden Fleece Petroleum Company. and he became the president of the club. And a traveller who used to call on me was a Jewish chap, Australian Jew, and he's a Carlton barrack, and he said to me one day at that particular time, "Oh, Fitzroy will go all right now." I said, "Why?" He said, "Yo, you've got Ern Josephs as the president." I said, "Yes, well, what about it?" He said, "Oh," he said, "he's a smart fellow, Ern Josephs," he said, he's a real smart Jew boy from Carlton. He said, we used to call him God when we were kids. He knew so much, he was so smart." But my opinion, he didn't do much for the club at all. I think once he got in there, the club started to go downhill a little bit faster than it had been going before. I think all he did is accelerated the downhill. There were some very bad decisions made when they left here and went down to St Kilda. I thought it was a very bad idea, and it proved to be so. It wasn't a good idea. They left their home base.
In the middle, Johnson tries to tap it to Atkins. He succeeds. Back to Primus. Wouldn't it be nice if they could finish with a goal? To the half-forward line. Richmond defence. Oh, they're misers. They have other ideas. And Jamie Tate says, "No way, Jose." And he kicks towards centre wing, and Richardson. There's the siren as Richardson lets it go into the stands. The end has come in Melbourne for Fitzroy.